The things you know now are now obvious.
Yeah.
And so you don't think other people would find it valuable. The opportunity cost that we all have is working on the wrong thing that people don't even want. And so that's writing, that's with your products, that's with videos. It's how can I make sure that my time spent on these high leverage activities actually is high leverage. I'm trying to optimize my whole business day to day with minimal number of things that take me away from being able to basically survey the whole machine, find the bottleneck, surgically go in and obsess on it as much as I can, fix it, and then move on to the next thing. I will take advice from no one who I wouldn't trade lives with.
Before we start this video, I have one small favor to ask of you. If you've been enjoying the US tour so far and all the effort we put into making these videos as best as possible for you, please hit the subscribe button down below so we can help more people every single week. Thank you. So one thing that I really noticed with the lean writing method was that it's everywhere, right? Like everyone is now using it across all platforms. But at the end of the day, that's how all repurposing should be done. So I said this to Cole, for us on a podcast side, it makes sense to go podcast, newsletter, Reels, Twitter, IG, LinkedIn. But most people don't think about it with their expansion of ideas, the opposites.
The lean writing works in both directions.
Exactly.
Right? If it's a product that's already built, you can work backwards. If it's an idea that's already fleshed out long form, you can work backwards. But I find it most useful for me when I'm in the validation stage. It's putting tweets out there. What do I think about this? Putting product ideas out there. What do I think about this? Because the opportunity cost that we all have is working on the wrong thing that people don't even want. And so that's writing, that's with your products, that's with videos. It's how can I make sure that my time spent on these high leverage activities actually is high leverage. And so we think about it as almost bootstrapping ideas. Every product we built started with a tweet or a survey or an email and an idea. And it's not that you jump to what we have now across multiple different businesses. It's one step at a time, one bottleneck at a time. And then you look back in 2 years, you've built something massive. And that's where I think people underestimate.
So give me an idea of how you've expanded the tweet idea into a product. So I see it for Ship 30 for 30, but maybe the other ones that are the high ticket offers you have, how does that expand out? Because that's a big insight to get from a tweet.
So Ship 30, obviously the story is started with a single tweet. I wrote, hey, would anyone like to join me on a 30-day writing challenge? Turned into a Slack group, turned into a digital product, turned into a Cohort-based course that we ran for 3 years. So from tweet to multiple millions in, obviously it sounds much easier than it was, but that's the path it took, right? One bottleneck after another, bootstrapped all the way to the end. For some of the high ticket, I think it's not necessarily a tweet, but it could be a sentence in a podcast that resonated with someone, like Cole talking about his ghostwriting experience. And particularly for me, how I stumbled into the world of ghostwriting. I didn't even know that I was ghostwriting myself. And when I started to tell that story of how I was working a 9-to-5, stumbled into a ghostwriting client, ended up making $5K from him, people resonated with that. And so it's the idea that if your story or your skill set or your expertise in some way that you don't even know you could monetize starts to stand out to people, that's when you go, okay, what if I were to make a product on this, what might it be? And how could I talk to someone who might be interested in this and go step by step by step?
That's smart. That's smart. You have an ability to realize those opportunities though. Most people, so Justin Welch calls it the gift of granted knowledge. Always talk about it. What's easy to you and takes you 2 minutes on a quick little spreadsheet is a product to somebody else that they don't realize. And I think that was my first podcast with Justin around. I was a central team when he moved from healthcare or Medicare, whatever it's called, into consulting. How was he able to do it? And the reason why is because what took him 5 minutes would take someone else 3 days. And that's what he called the curse of granted knowledge.
Interesting. I haven't heard it phrased that way, but it makes a lot of sense where the things you know now are now obvious.
Yeah.
And so you don't think other people would find it valuable until you start talking to someone who was in your shoes. We call this the 2-year test, which is look at everything you know today. Think back 2 years to all the things you didn't know then. Think then about all the knowledge you could share with that person. So for example, you've done how many podcasts now? 300?
250 so far.
250?
Yeah.
You've learned so many different things about how to run a podcast, how to reach out to guests, how to everything that you sell within a product that you already have. 2 years ago, you or whenever you started the pod would do anything to have the knowledge you have now. And that's what we try to get people to recognize is if you're not writing about anything yet, it's just because you think The idea is that you know so well, everyone else knows as well, but they don't. And so just pretend you're writing to yourself 2 years ago. What are all the questions that person would ask? And boom, you have 200 things to potentially write about.
I've told this story like 6,000 times, but William Brown, who you should definitely check out, Will's been a huge influence on me. He sells knowledge. So effectively, like when someone comes with a baking, they're an expert in baking, he'll teach them how to create a baking program, coaching program, right? He's taught it with knitting. He's taught it with the most crazy businesses.
Yeah.
And his analogy is like, if you're trying to learn golf, you don't try to learn from Tiger Woods. If anything, that would be terrible. He's a 10 out of 10. You don't even want to learn from a 9 out of 10. You want to learn from a 3 out of 10. So you only need to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of the ladder, so that therefore that person can give you all the knowledge and also not overwhelm you at the same time. Whereas then when you move up the ladder, when you're 5 out of 6, you might want to learn from someone who's actually done a tour of golf. So it's almost like we don't think what we have is valuable until we do it. Now I'll give you an example. So I'm like the opposite to imposter syndrome to some degree. Without sounding like cocky, I'd be like, if I do something, I'm like, I can sell this. I'll give you an analogy. I told you that we do like done for you offers.
Yeah.
Because I've built a coaching program, I've just messaged every one of my clients, been like, you want a coaching program? I can build you a Slack channel on the back end. It's just like hyper action because you're just doing something that someone else can't do. So I'm a 4 out of 10 at building out coaching programs, but that's valuable to someone who's 0 to 10.
And that builds on an idea I think about a lot is anyone who thinks they're wasting time pursuing an idea. Worst case, you end up with skills that put you a little bit ahead of someone where you were 6 months ago, and then you could teach it to them as well. So there's, I think on the business side, people go, if this isn't something I'm going to be able to do forever, if this isn't the 100% right thing, I shouldn't even pursue it. But the skills you build along the way, you can then transfer to anything else. So for example, for you, you built a coaching program in the podcast space. But if you found that podcasts were just no longer your thing, it's not a bunch of wasted time because of the outreach you learned how to do, the coaching you learned how to do. You could then apply it to fitness or what have you.
Whatever. One thing I was surprised about from your videos was that you said you were learning sales like last year. But you've always been doing sales though, right? You're just not maybe getting on calls. But,
Exactly.
But
So
everything is sales though. I was very surprised.
That was the realization for me is when I dove into sales, I was like, oh, okay, I'm actually just kind of doing a lot of these things really not that naturally, but subconsciously. It wasn't until I had to get on the phone and sell something to someone one-on-one, which I had never done. Because for the first 2 years of Ship 30, it was just emails, and that was the only way we sold anything. But when you get a little bit more expensive, like our premium Ghostwriting Academy is $600-$800. So you have to be able to have a conversation with someone to get them in a position to feel comfortable making an investment like that. For sure. And you have to fully understand, are they someone that could see results? Are they someone that you can actually help and you'd want to work with on an intensive a basis as we have? So that was just a completely different thing. But back to your point on you don't have to be an expert in it. I spent 30 days immersing myself in a mastermind from someone who was an expert, learned as much as I could, did about 2 months of all the sales myself, and then said, I know this well enough to teach it to someone behind me to get to a good enough level so that I can remove myself from sales and continuing to start to focus on other areas of business. And that I think is of any skill set I've developed is recognizing when I know something well enough to then teach it without necessarily being an expert in it, but I get myself to a proficient level. Figuring out what that level is a whole different conversation, but that's kind of the game plan we follow to continue building what we have. Is just figure out what role you need to go and surgically play, immerse yourself in playing that specific role, get it good enough, and then hire someone else underneath you who can do it 80% as well, and then keep moving.
Or even identifying someone who can do it better than you.
True.
Do you get me? As in, the reason why I was thinking about it is because if you think of software engineering, if you don't know engineering, you can't hire an engineer.
Fair.
Do you get me? So you need to have a good understanding of like, what does a tech stack look like so that you're able to bring someone in. And the reason being is because when you ask a developer, can you fix this? And he says 3 days, you know he's taking the piss. It's actually 4 hours. Do you get me? So the reason why I'm saying that is because like podcasting isn't actually that complicated. There's just a process. But because I had done it all, if I send over something to an editor, which I have in the past, and they're like, oh, it won't be done until tomorrow, I'm like, dude, it's a fucking like transition. Fix it. Does that make sense? Like you understand the nuts and bolts of your business, which is the complement of you and Cole, because he understands the writing part, you understand biz ops. So you can't be pulled, the wool can't be pulled over your eyes to some degree. You're just more proficient, right? one reason why startups fail, by the way, is
Right.
because they're doing stuff they're solving problems they don't know with people that don't even know how to do them.
I think you just identified a skill gap for me, though, is I haven't found the ability to do the work necessary to find someone at maybe a high level manager level who I know would do something better than I could. So most of our hires at this point have been hiring people either from within our program or who have played somewhat similar roles, but maybe not fulfilled that role all the way. And it's been a training. And I do think what's required for us to take our next step is bringing in people who are actually better at that thing than we are. And that is a whole different ballgame. But it's funny, you hear it all the time. High level entrepreneurs talk about it's all about people. It's all about people. And as I've been growing, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of, but I got to figure it out first. And like, then I'll figure it. And as I get higher and higher, I'm like, I see why it's all about people.
And the right people, right?
Yes.
So the reason I'm saying this is because you said, Cole told me you hired 2 coaches, right? Is that correct? In your coaching program, you have 2 people that are...
Well, we have a success team of 6 now.
Correct.
Yep. So
Correct.
6 and then 6 sales reps. All of those, a year ago, we had 0 on both sides.
That's interesting, because I think me and you think quite similar, just like more logical than like more empathy driven. And when genuinely.
Yeah.
And when we built our Done With You offer, one of my mates, close mates, Tom, I asked him to join our team, and he was a teacher for children. And it was actually from a disadvantaged area in like Wales.
Wow.
And so he was used to working with like difficult kids. And like, I'm the most difficult kid of all of them, right? So I'm like, yeah, here's the logic. Here's the program. If everyone comes in, do the work, get on with it. And he's like, no. And immediately he just had a different way to like coach people. He had like philosophies, frameworks. And it wasn't frameworks of the work, the subject. It was more just like how someone consumes stuff. And it was stuff from school that he was bringing in. And it's interesting because I look at like the success, not the success, but the completion of like our students going through the program. And I'm like, this guy should be up here by now, this guy up here. And he's like, no, there's a different way to tackle the problem. So the TLDR in this is that someone is better than me at that component that some people might say is non-tangible, but is actually the most tangible because that's what keeps retention, turns people into raving fans and so on. So there's just levels to it.
It's how do you get people to do the thing that you know they should do? And so we operate with a handful of pillars within our success department. And this is a whole rabbit hole, but I watched a Alex Hormozy video from a while ago. And I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, he filmed this podcast and like buried in the archives. And he asked to do the reflection question of what type of business are you in? And he gave a bunch of examples. And so one example is like a supplement company who thinks they are in the supplement business, but really they are a marketing company. Like Athletic Greens is not a supplement business, they're a marketing company. Their goal is to market the product as well, because as good as the product is, it's not really, you don't make the decision as much based on the product because you're probably going to feel a little bit better. And then once you're on it, you're not going to cancel. And then he said on the software business, he thought he was in the marketing. He's like, oh, I just need to get people to sign up. But no, you're in the product business. You're in the making something people actually really like. Then marketing takes care of itself. For our business, I sat there and said, what business are we in? And we're not a marketing and sales business. We're not a product business. We are an accountability business. And that would be surprising. And how he related that is fitness is not marketing. It's not sales. It's getting people to do something that you've already defined. And so for us, we've taken that to heart over the last 4 or 5 months, building our success team out to 6 people, going way over the kind of industry standard of how many people each coach should be working with, just trying to give as much individual attention to each person that comes through. Because it's not that, and as we looked at student success rates and things like that, it wasn't that people weren't getting results after going through the program. It was they would find a way to not go all the way through. So they just needed someone to help get them from module 1 to module 8.
Oh, it's a nearly glass half empty versus glass half full, right? Their mentality.
Exactly. So all we have to do is say, what does it take? And we inverted it. It's like, okay, what has to happen for someone to fail? And it's they show up and they don't go through any of the modules. Okay, we're going to build everything we can to make sure that they have an assignment to go through. The next was they don't ask for help. So we're going to make sure they know there's 24/7 access. You can ask help at any time, and we're going to get back to you quickly to reinforce that. And then the third is mostly a belief thing, which is if you fail one time, you don't quit. So if you reach out to someone and offer a service and they say no or block you or hang up on you, you don't stop right there. So how do you build the beliefs into doing that? That's like our entire business right now. I told Cole, if we can just focus on that, sales marketing takes care of itself.
Do you think that's the difference between a 1 million a year business and 10 million a year?
I think it's the difference between 5 and 50, actually. Because if you can scale the model to get, and it's funny you say that, but like that is actually the thing. If the accountability and fulfillment works around 5 to 10 million very well, duplicating the process of people to then do the initial or the new fulfillment, scaling the marketing of something is literally just clicking buttons.
As in running more ads.
More ads. It's just clicking buttons of scaling up the ad budget. And so if you can nail like the unit economics of this many people come in, they get this much attention, they see this result, we upsell them this way. Marketing and scaling is relatively straightforward if you have that small group system down.
Fuck, man, this is such a good insight. I want to say a big thank you for this already. I know we jumped straight into the deep end, and we'll go backwards and over
for sure.
But this is so fucking valuable because this is insight into just what's working. So let's say through the door, and I heard you speak before about you can't really scale your personal brand to get more people through. That's where you introduce ads, for instance, right?
Yep.
To reverse engineer that, so going between that 5 to 50 million delta of difference, are you bringing people in the front door to ship 30 for 30, or you bring people in the back door into the main offer?
It will be likely for us. We're on pace to do between 7 to 10 this year if things go well, in the back end of the year, which is typically like kind of a variable. We don't really know, but it always accelerates around November because people decide to make a change.
But dude, big well done on that, because there is there's very, very little info businesses that are actually doing those numbers. They talk at the air, but I know that you guys are not bullshitting, but there's literally, in our space, I would say there's very little.
Well, first, I appreciate that. And this is what I want to geek out on because it's what excites me and it's where I spend most of my time. So in terms of how you scale from 5 to 50, first, I'm going to take a wild guess because I do not know. Like I can pontificate, but I'm not going to sit here and say I've done that. But our plan will be, you have to eventually sell to colder and colder audiences. That is the game. And so if you take that to be true, you can do a couple things. One, you can run ads to bring people into your personal brand and then not try to sell them immediately, and then use the ongoing branding and organic content to kind of nurture them. That's one thought. But, and I actually haven't thought through this. For us, I don't think we're trying to scale to 50. I think we're going to get to 10 on a run rate basis, which would be like $800K cash a month. At that point, you basically decide, do I want to camp out here? And I was just talking to someone earlier. In business, from my experience, each tripling is kind of a different ball game. You have to think differently. So from 0 to 1K a month, 1K to 3, 3K to 10, each one of those, and that's how we talk about with ghostwriters. It's like each of those milestones. You get your first client, 1 to 3, and then 3 to 10 requires different thinking. 10 to 30 a month, 30 to 100, 100 to 300, and 300 to a million. So we're kind of in that 300 to a million zone right now. And each one, once you're there, it would be, okay, how do you get to 3 a month? And I haven't thought that far ahead, to be honest. But the game plan would be, to get to 10, you have to be selling to enough cold audiences. At that point, you probably have the sales and acquisition and fulfillment system dialed in to get there. Then it's a decision on how much operational complexity you want to take on. Because a lot of things scale linearly on that. So problem customers or just team size. Do you really want to be running a team of 50 on something like this? Or are you pretty cool with like a high performing culture around 20? So I haven't really gotten there, but it's fun to keep,
to see what's happening at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So on your high-end offer, is that delivered in cohort-based or open coaching?
Evergreen. So we learned from Ship 30 that quarterly marketing cycles were the bane of our existence, because when we ran Ship 30, we ran a quarterly cohort. We recently transitioned that to an always-on digital product, 30-day self-paced challenge, but it was a cohort-based 30-day challenge. What that meant was we had a 13-week marketing cycle. So every day within that 13 weeks, all the way down from the first day the card is open to cohort enrollment closed and then we start fulfilling on that cohort was about 13 weeks, which means we only got 4 chances a year to iterate. Meaning if we found something in the middle of the marketing sequence that was like, oh, that's cool, we should do that again, we had to wait 13 weeks to do it. By that time, we forgot it. So instead, PGA is more or less a weekly marketing cycle. You can join every single day, but we have like the group meet and greet session every Monday, and it's a 16-week program.
Sorry, group. Okay, so you're doing kickoffs every Monday.
But we have one-on-one onboarding calls with every student. So it's immediately
And a
when they
group
join,
intake.
they can have an onboarding call the next day. The meet and greet's just kind of an event on the calendar so you can meet other people.
Okay, but so is that, sorry, this is just
Yeah.
important for the context. The context is always important,
Yeah.
right? Is the Monday for new people
Yep.
coming in and the old people are not in that?
Correct. Just that call. But we have tons of group calls that happen.
Fucking
during
how many people are signing a week?
Yeah. Any given week, 20, 25. So we have enough for one-on-one onboarding calls. That's the main thing. The group meet and greets just to chat with as many people as you want.
Jesus Christ, man. There's a lot of logistics moving there.
There are. And that's what I actually enjoy doing is managing that system because we have the system now. It's beautiful. And now we're not in a figure it out stage. We're in a refine the system, make the marketing more efficient, make the sales more efficient, make the fulfillment better. We don't have to do anything new, which is great for me as someone who likes to just iterate. I find the most value when I see something and well, let's go improve that 5-10% and repeatedly do that. And that probably traces back to playing offensive line or like a boring position in football where it's all just minuscule improvements. But back to your point on where we go from here, it's ongoing improvement to what we have. And then to get to the next level, it might require something new, but we're not really considering that yet. But happy to jam on any questions.
Of course, man. And these are such selfish questions.
Yeah, no, please. That to me, how these interviews always go best is like, it turns into let's give each other value because
sure.
I've heard everyone's story that goes on podcasts. Like I don't need to talk about how I got here or whatever. It's like, what is important today?
Yeah.
Because that's when you're going to be the most passionate and you're not on just a general talk track.
Of course, man.
You know?
And like, man, if you saw my post last week about coming to the US, it's about what's working now.
Right. Exactly.
It's what's working now. So it's not a failure at all, but my biggest like problem with our coaching was that I said this to Cole earlier too, just offline, was that when we did cohort-based.
Okay.
So you've shipped 30 for 30, for example.
Yep.
30 fucking posts, 30 days. The promise is clear.
Yep.
You can see what the goal is. It's urgency getting in. There's a defined goal. Back to the value equation from Hormozy. We did something similar with our coaching, which was cohort 8 weeks. Okay. Still really expensive. It was like 3,000 or 4,000 for 8 weeks.
Yep.
But because it was 8 weeks, you were like, all right, let's go.
Yep.
So it sold like crazy. But then I had an idea, and I was speaking to a few people, that let's give them more time. So let's give them yearly access and leave the open coaching. And when I moved to open coaching, on the calls, people were like, I don't want to do this for a year. So I'm like, dude, I can give you more help in a year. And they're like, nope.
They want speed.
They want speed.
Especially the people you're selling to.
Right? So that's when I had actually rolled back just the idea. We were talking with the team yesterday, being like, is it better to do cohort, quarterly? And then from an economics perspective, can we maximize the audience size to bring in more people per quarter than we would per month? Because if we're doing it per month, I feel like a broken record when I'm marketing every single week for the same thing, or when I view other people. Now, there's obviously a way around that, which is by you do a re-offer, you make a few adjustments and whatnot. Let's get your thoughts on that.
Okay. Thank you for asking all these questions because this is going to be a lot of fun. Why, first question, couldn't you have someone start today and someone start in a week and still go through the curriculum? Just so I understand the fulfillment. Are you teaching all these sessions live? Why? What is the main reason that you couldn't have someone start every week?
We could.
Okay.
But it's just people didn't want to start. People didn't want the longer. I was giving them a year access.
Okay, so why wouldn't you do 8 weeks, but you can start anytime?
Oh, well, that would be cohort then, is that the weekly calls would run as a parallel.
Okay, so the difference here is you take the weekly calls and you turn those into Q&As. So anyone, and you theme the Q&As. So for example, with a podcast, right?
Yeah. It's strategy, growth, monetization.
Exactly. So you have a call for each.
Yeah.
You have a defined 8-module, 8-week curriculum that you already have done. And people are going through that on the cohort. Your success coach would work with that individual person to go through that roadmap and then only send them to the group calls as necessary. That's what we do. And what that allows is someone could start every single day and be on different timelines than everyone else.
Do you manage that though?
What do you mean?
Do you have like an Excel spreadsheet or a variation?
Where people are?
Yeah, as in like, Johnny, who started in March, his 8 weeks are up in July.
So we have one of the more in-depth CRMs, and this is where there's levels to the operational complexity. I can't remember who said, I saw it on Twitter, but I think my buddy Daniel Fazio said this. The business that can handle the most operational complexity will win.
That's so interesting, dude.
Because by definition, the only bottleneck right now you have to having someone start every week is like, I actually don't know how to organize that. But that should also empower you because other people have done it, which means it's very doable and possible. You just haven't seen the ideal scene. So if you looked at the fun part about this, I can show you after. You look at our CRM, I'll show you our success pipeline. I can tell you where every single student in PGA is, how long they've been in there, what assignment they're on, the last time they were on Slack, the last time they submitted assignment, the ratio of how many assignments they've completed to how long they've been in the program as a yellow, red, green stoplight. That's all built out for every single person. So I can manage the whole success department from one spreadsheet.
Jesus Christ.
And that's the fun part about, for me, being able to blend a background from finance and computer science. Like you will.
It's a scorecard.
Exactly, right? It literally is. And then once you have that, once you have that system, you can bring more people in. And all it is rows that change if you have the human fulfillment.
So the dream outcome is still building grow your podcast in 8 weeks.
Yep.
But then it just comes at a different level playing field, because we have that weekly Q&A call on a Wednesday, and then we have some master classes. Like Tim Stoddard spoke yesterday, and he's come in, guys come in and just drop like insane value. Of course, and you do something similar too, right?
And so how you guys could do it is 8 weeks of direct coaching, lifetime or year-long access to the community calls. So that's what we do. You get 6 one-on-one calls with your success coach.
Oh, okay.
And so it's limited, it's defined. You have an exact agenda. And here's, I love talking about this. You basically create the training for each coach to host each call as specific as possible. So it takes the variability out of it. So I know we could have 20 coaches. There's an exact agenda for each call. And so it's scaling. If Cole and I were to do this one-on-one coaching with each person, here's what we would do on that call. Okay.
Yeah.
Now it's a skill issue. I just have to learn how to train the person to do that on that call. And that's the whole fulfillment thing we've been working on.
So are your coaches writers?
Yes. I'd say right now, 5 out of the 6 came from PGA. So they ghostwrite on the side, and now they work full-time with us. And then they've all had writing experience in the past.
Dude, that's the best mechanism, is to have your employees be previous customers.
I would say of our 22 now, so we have a team offsite here next Friday.
Sick.
We'll have 22, potentially 2 more, 24 if you include our VAs who are in the Philippines. It's fun to say that because last year was a 10 and the year before that was 3. So we're from 3 to 10 to 24, and it's we can talk about that whole process. But I forgot where we were before that.
I forgot what we were talking about too. It's all part of it. Let me. So Cole said you're a numbers guy. You're a maths nerd.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about like the economics on. So one, on your business, because like those numbers are so wild, dude. Number one, in terms of just like what that actually means in terms of how many users, the operational load, and so on. But then in terms of how you are maximizing the economics of your audience, what made you change the pricing model that you have, and also maybe create the offers to maximize the economics of the offer?
It's certainly not something we have, 1, figured out perfectly, or 2, had some grand vision of. Ship 30 started as $50 and you got your money back if you wrote all 30 days, because I was so terrified to charge money for something. So I'm sitting in PayPal, like checking if someone's written every day. I got this big spreadsheet, sending money back. I'm getting flagged by PayPal for too many refunds, all this stuff. I'm like, it's part of it. Trying on the phone with them, whatever. And it's just been a continual process of, can we charge more? What do we deliver to charge more? If we've learned anything about pricing, we now have 3 things people can buy at different price points. We have a $20 a month paid newsletter. We have a $300 async self-paced course, and we have a higher ticket group and one-on-one coaching program. I think that most offers should fall around those 3 price points, and that's how we're operating. Again, That could be totally wrong, and someone can tell me that. But we found that you want to have something that people can buy on a monthly basis. You want to have some async product that gets someone an awesome result, and then something higher ticket that's much more expensive than all of those.
Could you strip out the high ticket, removing the coaching element, and just sell the info?
So you could, but here's the thing. I just talked about being in the accountability business. If you just sold the info, you're not going to get the results. And so then that product doesn't grow by viral word of mouth. Because if you don't get the result, people don't tell their friends. And then in a year, you're like, why isn't this growing? It's because every person you brought in has been like, that was okay. I wish it would have had more blank. And so now our program is designed to make people go, wow, they literally held my hand the entire time. I feel confident putting someone else in there because I know they'll get the same experience. So we could, but I actually don't think it's worth trying to sell that at a lower price point, because then it just undermines what we're doing at the higher level.
And it could cannibalize it.
Yep.
You could just have more people buy the lower ticket one.
Right.
And then you're just going to give up
but
results.
Again, this is all something we could test, but it's not the bottleneck to getting us to the next level.
Interesting.
Like we're not struggling to monetize a certain group that we need like that middle 2K price point spot. We just need to be more efficient with getting people in the front end of the big thing, because we've proven that works. Now it's an eyeballs game.
And that's when you think you've maxed out your audience, you think?
I don't think we've maxed out our audience, but I have changed my mind on my thoughts on organic versus paid over the last year or so.
Same.
Organic is really solid until you recognize that you really just have a job, and your job is to keep creating content. And if you ever stop, it is hard to run on its own. But you can make one ad and just run that ad for a long time, and it will continue to go. So I'm still kind of refining my ideas around this, but how I've met in the middle is I regret every day for the last 3 years that I have not had organic retargeting ads on. So the way our system works now is we have retargeting on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And it's a vortex now where if you come to one of our social profiles and you click on the link to our website, it pixels you across every platform.
Fuck. That's so
The
powerful.
next time they go on Twitter, they're going to see an ad. But because they've already seen us from an organic perspective, they recognize the ad. So the click-through rate on the ad's higher, the targeting is cheaper, and the eventual ad spend that you can put in because you have this organic engine as well is way higher than someone who's just cold.
The show rate would be higher.
Everything. Exactly. Yeah. Every business metric improves when you have that organic brand, but where people are underutilizing it is you're getting all this attention. You can then pay to put your face back in front of them for a long time, forever, basically. And so the way, just tactically how this works, YouTube retargeting ads. So say someone follows Cole on Twitter and they click on our PGA website and they don't opt in. Next time they go to YouTube, YouTube retargets first sponsored video will be a Cole video, more than likely. Will be one of Cole's YouTube videos. So they click on that, then they head over to Instagram because they went to the website earlier. Instagram retargeting is picked up. So we're just showing, and this is the beautiful part, is your ads don't have to be as direct offer as other people because it can just be continued education. You're just getting to pay to put your face back in front of them. When you have just organic, you cannot do that.
Interesting.
So you get to do it on autopilot across every platform. Would
you bring people from there into the lead magnet to own a deal?
Exactly. So we have it where the beautiful part about these platforms, and look, I'm a paid ads 2 out of 10, maybe a 3.
Because you learned it yourself.
I just learned it this year. So same thing, I learned sales in 23, paid ads this year. And now I'm like our full media buyer. I run the marketing for what we're doing. The beautiful part about this is you can bring people in top of funnel and use ads that way. Or you can say, look, I'm only going to retarget people who have already opted in for our email course, but haven't filled out an app to potentially join. So I can show them ads that literally just say, fill out an app. Or if they've already filled out an application, they can book a call. And the really cool thing about that is it's the same way you would send an email and look at, like you can, it's called Liquid, where you can edit an email based on, where a customer is, or if they bought something, don't show them this offer, or if they're from this country, like say this thing, whatever. You can do that on these paid ad platforms, which is incredible efficiency. That organic is really good at getting attention, but to efficiently show that attention the right offer, continue to build equity with that attention, it all comes down to like the lever of retargeting.
Do you want to grow and monetize your podcast, but you don't know where to begin? Have you tried all the tricks and hacks, but nothing has worked? Have you been wasting time, money, and energy and seeing an analytics chart with no growth? That's where Vox comes in. We've been helping podcasts grow and monetize their shows for many years. We've grown shows to over 100 million views, done over 10 million downloads, generated over $2 million in only the last year alone. And we can help you grow and monetize your own podcast. We've had some shows go from absolutely zero. We've had some of the biggest influencers in the world come to us to help and improve their show. So if you want to learn exactly our podcast growth flywheel and exactly how we can do this for you and completely replicate success, schedule a call right down below with myself and we can go through the exact model for you and to grow your podcast this year. I like your perspective on it because I talk a lot about people have beliefs about things that they don't even care about that no one else also cares about. You know, it's the organic versus paid approach. It's the coaching versus agency. It's the carnivore versus vegan, but people don't actually give a shit about it. So I like the fact that you're agnostic to the idea. You're like, what's just going to work? That involves a more efficient business, more profitable business. Because I went full circle on that because I used to be like, oh, it's just organic only. And then I was like, well, we're not going to get to 200K a month because the podcast space is actually pretty small and people that have a purchasing power is even smaller. So we need to be efficient and show our face up more and more. Does that make sense?
Definitely. And I mean, we made a video talking about takeaways from a mastermind we had like a year ago. And I'm on video saying, I don't know if we'll ever run paid ads because everyone here, and this was like, now I can connect the dots. Everyone at the mastermind was asking us about our business metrics, and we had higher profit margin because we weren't spending on ads. We had all this organic, right? And they're like, oh, this is amazing. I was like, okay, cool. That means I shouldn't run paid ads because I don't want to have their problem. But the mistake was recognizing that paid ads on top of organic is just rocket fuel if you use it correctly. But they all struggled to have organic, which meant their paid didn't go as far. Because paid, and then what do? They go to your profile. You don't have any content. All you're doing is showing me an ad. I don't want to do this. But if you give me a ton of educational value on the organic side, and then the ad is the CTA, boom, you have them combined.
So that's so fucking interesting. So I was at James Kemp's mastermind and all the guys were ads only. And they were like, yeah, this is my fucking CPM or whatever the metric is, right? They knew like
media buyer speak.
They knew all the metrics to a T. And then James was like to me, he was like, so what do you do? And I was like, I just go on podcasts and I just talk about shit. And he's like, but how much time does it take you? And I'm like, but I like doing it and it also works. And he's like, okay, you need to be able to quantify that so that then you can therefore allocate the rest of the time into, let's say if you ran ads, because all these guys, like some of them there was some guys that were super impressive, man. They had like 4 or 5 different businesses, all like 3 or 4 million a year, but they all ran a similar model, which was ads to an agency or to a service or whatever, right? But they were much older, not kids. They're not kids, right?
Yeah.
And his audience were actually quite old, so it was an interesting model. But it was just funny because they were asking me these questions, and I was like, dude, I just talk to people on the internet, and so and basically
it's a foreign world to them. If you don't have organic, you think it's impossible. And the beautiful part is it's teachable, right? We actually think that if you're running a business strictly on paid and you want to have a more efficient paid ad metric, you just need organic because the return on investment there of just going 0 to 1 on the organic, if you took 10% of your ad spend, reallocated that to a media team that would help you create organic on Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram, wherever. I can't fully quantify this, but it would be my hypothesis that your paid metrics would all become more efficient because they have something to work on in the meantime.
I get you.
And they see the ad, they go, okay, organic, cool. Now they're on your email list. You hit them with organic, high value educational emails. That all starts to work together versus the churn and burn. I get one attempt at someone's eyeballs. If they don't buy, they don't book a call, they don't do whatever, they're gone.
When you were working on Wall Street, did you ever think about that you'd be building like a 10 million a year plus business?
Nope. I wanted to make $10,000 from the internet in 2020. So all of 2020, I started writing online in 2020, January 2020, I put out my first newsletter.
2020, yeah.
So a little over 4 years ago. No, not even 2020. Yeah, 4 years. So I had never written anything on the internet, published my first thing in January 2020. I had one goal, it was 10,000, because I was like, okay, cool. I'm saving, and it's crazy. I mean, I was making 100K a year on Wall Street, but saving like $1,000 a month, maybe
Same.
800.
Same.
Ridiculous. And knew that I was not going to get to the level of wealth I eventually wanted, create the life for my family and all that.
Do you think that's a system?
What?
Do you think that's like a manufactured system of like, you know, I bought the lie, which was you can go and do this, and now you're working on Wall Street and like you've probably paid for the debt for your...
Yeah, it's very, very smart marketing by the CEOs of that company. They pay you enough that sounds like a lot, but as you make more, your ability to make more elsewhere goes down. And so you're more reliant on that company, and they pay you just a little bit less than you think you want, but not enough to make you leave. It's a whole, I mean, I could go down that whole rabbit hole, but as I was watching around the guys I worked with and other guys on like our trading floor, you could just tell that they weren't that happy. They weren't making as much as they nearly thought they were, but they couldn't leave because now they didn't have any skills that they could then transfer to something else. So long rabbit hole there. But did I ever imagine I'd be building this what I am? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Because the goal was $1,000 a month in extra income, because that would double how much I was saving. And I had like my little spreadsheet of when I'd be at this net worth and that net worth. I'm like, oh, cool. I get there twice as fast if I just do this.
Yeah.
And I mean, my first year in 2020, by the end, we ended up doing like 40 or 50 and then $1 million in 21. So it was like boom, boom. And then I ended up quitting in 22 April.
Do you think people get caught in that system? Like you kind of alluded to it, that like they're dependent on it and they don't actually have real skills. That's the thing, right? You don't have like monetizable skills. Like the story that I tell is like I was working in State Street in London. I walked down like the office floor, it was all grey. Everyone there was like fat, bald, and they had their head down that I could only see their bald head, and they were eating. And like 6 o'clock would come and no one would move. And the other side of it too was that I was always the one that was in the gym beforehand. And they would just look down at me in this. And I remember I used to bring in my lunch boxes. So I had 2 bags. I had one for my lunch boxes, just chicken and rice. And I'd put them into the fridge. And all these guys in their mid-30s would be like, oh, that's going to run out of you soon. Like you're going to slow down in your late 20s. And the other side of it as well was they would all go for drinks and shit. And because I'm like super ADHD, I was like, I'm not going to the gym. I'm not going for drinks. I'm going to the gym.
Yeah.
Or I had to get up to go to the gym the next day. So I never went to those things. And I was like ostracized.
The culture, I was the same way, right? If I wasn't going out to lunch, if I wasn't drinking, it was just like, I remember like heating up chicken and rice and broccoli and like a bunch of people bitching in the room. I'm like, okay, you guys just go eat your slop, and gray and bald is definitely the right answer. But in terms of your question was, do I think that people get trapped in that because they don't build other skills? Absolutely. And
dependency.
The way I describe it is, if your job is not at a place where if you worked twice as hard or learned twice as much, would your income double? And if you cannot say that, if you cannot say that, then you should have some vehicle where that is true. Because it's only when I started to start my own business or ride on the side and build that whole thing up that I now had a vehicle where I was the bottleneck. My personal skill, my mindset around money, my consistency was directly either leading to or limiting my income. But when you work a full-time job, if I show up at 4 a.m. and leave at 10, I might make 5 to 10% more with a little performance bonus at the end of the year. But your inputs and outputs are disconnected, which means there's no feedback loop to understand if I was better, what specifically do I need to get better at to make more? Your bottleneck is middle management bureaucracy. So that is what actually traps people, is they never build this feedback loop of learning because they're not rewarded for learning more. They learn more and they make the same amount, and maybe they get a promotion. And that promotion cycle is so long that 10 years go by, they're 34, and what am I going to do now? I got kids, I got a mortgage, I can't ever learn another skill, and it's over. Which is scary.
That's held over your head as like a carrot as well, like the promotion, the MD. Like a lot of my friends, close friends, like I've just been kind of helping see the other side of the world because they're smart guys. Like some of my friends are like traders, and I've been teaching showing them like how to document your writing on Substack, and then maybe help people on a one-to-one basis and so on. And they're really opening their eyes to it, and they're really all into it. But it's like they've given that time because they know that it's not a long enough horizon. They're going to lose that insurance. Other people have tried to help, said and they didn't do it, and now they're stuck. Now, was there like a specific point for you that you were like, okay, this has to end?
Yes, very tangibly. I was at work one day, it was like 6 p.m. and someone on my trading floor asked for permission to go to their son's Little League game, and their boss said no. It was like, it wasn't a no, but it was we really need this done kind of thing. And I remember just kind of watching afterwards. And I was 23 at the time, so I'd been there a little under a year. And I mean, this was dream job, right? It's the only job I had ever worked from an actual job. I had tutoring jobs and whatever growing up. But I interned there going into my junior year of college, interned there going into my senior year, and then worked there right out of college. So it was the only job interview that I had.
And that was Morgan Stanley?
BlackRock.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that happen, and my long-term vision is definitely have a big, loving family. And I remember seeing that, thinking I might work 10 more years. I think he was probably 14 years older than me, so 36. I might work 14 more years just to be there. Oh no. And that was what changed it for me. And it wasn't like I went home and quit immediately. I went home and said, okay, right, because that I think is a massive mistake. I said, what do I need to do to passively pursue other opportunities in the meantime? And that led me to writing, because I could spend the same amount of time that other people would go to a networking event or all this stuff, and I could write something that's going to spread my ideas around the internet for free forever with an army of robots working 24/7. And that's exactly what happened, because that led me to meet someone who I ghost wrote for. That led me to a $5,000 client. That connected me with Cole. I mean, every single thing came back to just putting my ideas out there, and that one moment.
The story you have of like getting the $5,000 client is so cool, because most people's idea of making their first dollar online unlocks a level of their brain. They're like, oh my God, what could happen? Whereas for you, it was like a huge thing, massive, right? Mm-hmm. You know, it was like a big asymmetrical return.
Exactly.
You know, you literally writing for someone sending you $5K, because the same time that you were in BlackRock, probably the same time, like you're 27?
28, yeah.
I'm 28 too.
Oh,
96.
There we go. Yep, 96.
Jesus Christ, man, you've done so much in your life. Anyway, so I was working in State Street, and it was like that. It was the grind, it was a grudge, and so on and so forth. I was making a fraction. It was my internship, so same as you, senior year, whatever. And I was living in London, and I was, I told you like I was a party. Did I tell you this? I was telling Cole this. I was like a party boy when I was younger. Yeah. Everyone in Ireland is, right? Yeah. But I was like really deep down, like drinking, drugs, like all that shit. I was definitely a bad boy, and when I was younger, and I was really into like raves, festivals. But what was really common in London was fashion for raves and festivals. It was a huge boom, just a boom, like
interesting
90s, 80s vintage clothing.
Yeah.
And I remember I moved to London, and I was like, Jesus Christ, like this is everywhere. And I knew a guy that built a company called True Vintage. It was like one of the best in class vintage clothing brands. And I met the guy in a Urban Outfitters, which is kind of like H&M. And I remember thinking like, I could do this. So I started importing clothes from Italy to my apartment in London, and started selling them through my apartment in massive boxes on Shopify. But I started ordering these boxes that were different grades, so grade A, B, C, okay? Different quality.
Yeah.
So basically, I'd buy these boxes when I got paid, and they would just fill up in my bedroom. And bear in mind, at the time, I was on Tinder dating and shit, and I'd bring girls home, and they'd see all the boxes.
What are you doing here? Don't worry about it.
But anyway, I was starting selling stuff really quickly. Just product market fit just worked really quickly. And I wasn't making a ton of money, but it opened up the eyes, right? And I was selling into the UK and US market. Now that ended up being a cash flow problem, whatever, but it just opened the eyelids, whether it was $7 socks or a $30 jacket, and then just picking the thing up and just posting it off, right?
Damn, okay. A couple questions on that. First, I think why that clicked was you had the vehicle of, I did something, I made more money, and that was probably one of the first times you had that in your life. Where when you're working at State Street, you do something good, you make the same amount. So that reward is not there. But when you have your own e-commerce brand, it's like, I did this thing that led to more revenue. Cool. Reinforced positive behavior. Continue in that direction.
Good point.
And then my question is, did you have any kind of YouTube fitness influence growing up?
Oh, huge.
Like Rob Lipset is who comes to mind for you, but like the Max Tunings, Christian Guzman.
All of them.
I mean, same with me.
Dude.
So I hear you selling shirts out of your living room, and I'm like, that was exactly what those guys did. And I remember watching them so vividly in like high school, early college, thinking, wow, I'm a part of their journey. It's so cool to watch it. And they obviously took a slightly different path than the one I ended up taking, but I can just recognize when I hear that, and then obviously you're into fitness as well, that those guys had a big impact on me. So I just want to share that.
Are you familiar with like Rob's journey?
Yes.
So Rob's a client of us.
Really?
Yeah. So
Damn,
I have a crazy story with Rob.
Wow.
It's a crazy story. So I grew up always into fitness, but small poppy syndrome in Ireland, like it's all like, cutting people down.
Yep.
Rob was the first YouTuber ever in Ireland.
Wow.
That like a fitness YouTuber.
Yeah.
So he boomed up, but he boomed up for the right reasons because he helped so much people, but also because people were trying to take the piss out of him. But I was always on Rob's side when I was super young. I was like 16, 17, 18, and I was always following. I remember his second video was him with a whiteboard being like, this is macros.
Yep.
And I'm there like, this is macros, right? So I ended up following him for years. And then when I launched my podcast specifically, he was like the 42nd guest.
Wow.
So it was like a really cool moment. And then about 100 episodes in, he was doing other things on the business side. And I was like, oh, do you want to come back on? And then he was back on. He was like, how do you do this? And I was like, oh, dude, it's fine. You just like fucking get this cable, you stick it in here. And he was like, can you do this for me?
I know he's got a podcast now, right?
I launched it.
Oh, no way, dude. That's sick.
So then
Wow.
from like following him from when I was like 15, now we started working together. And now like we're friends now.
Wow.
And then we also work together. And bear in mind, so like in the agency space, people work with people for like 2 months. We've been working together for 2 years. And we've never, ever, ever had a disagreement, argument, whatever. He's the most chill person. When you would think like these influencers or these YouTubers are like super anal, he's like, fuck it, let's just keep shipping it. And that's why he grew so much.
Yep.
It's because we might have bad audio from a studio or whatever, but we just keep churning stuff out. And like we run the entire podcast on the back end. So it's so funny to see, And he spoke at our incubator recently, and success leaves clues. The reason why he's in the game for 10 years, the reason why Cole is in the game for 10 years is because they just love it. They just truly love their art and craft. And like a lot of the guys that are in our program, like they could be like American or whatnot. They didn't know who Rob was. And they're like, this guy's the most infectious person for
No
the
doubt.
spirit, energy.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, he's so sick, dude. He's just a sick dude.
It's so funny hearing those guys have podcasts.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, I listen to just their podcasts, like Tim Ferriss or Huberman. I never listen to the YouTube version. So I know them just as audio. But those guys, I always knew as video. And so now I'm like going for a walk and I throw on a Christian Guzman or a Max Tuning podcast, who are good friends with Rob, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And it's a very different experience. I'm like, wow, one, these guys have grown up since I really was watching their stuff. And two, it's just a different medium and you can tell they're adapting, continuing to build things.
Oh, dude, this is such an interesting topic. So, I asked you, are your coaches writers? So they get it. So if you're familiar with GenFlow, the guy that owns it's called Sean Haniff. He builds the products in the back end for Lara Costa, Iman Gadzhi, Ali Abdal. He builds the products in the back end usually for them. Their company is called GenFlow. And he's an advisor, mentor to myself.
Yeah.
And he was like, the number one thing you have to be is just, this is to do with culture and everything. He's like, you have to be about it. Like you're about like writing, Cole is, I'm about podcasts, I believe in it. And the fact that you're about it means that with your clients, you can send them an article here, a blog post here. You're just so ingrained with it. And the reason why I'm saying that is because like a lot of these people are not about it, and that's where they come in and out specifically. Sorry, what did you just mention there before?
Rob Lipset.
No, but just
Christian being like Christian and Max being in the game and having podcasts with.
Sorry, that was it. So the reason why I asked you about were they working with you is because all of my team all grew up watching Christian Guzman and Max Tuning. So when they're editing those videos, the guys are like, what the fuck? When I was like 12 based in India, I was watching these YouTubers.
Wild.
And now like my COO, who I just promoted, he's like talking to Rob often and everything, and he like likes the opportunity. So what I'm just trying to say is like the culture you build reflects who you kind of are effectively. And that's why people like working with us. People like working with you. There's good ethos underneath, right?
100%. I mean, Cole and I had very similar upbringings. We just did different things. And we were both professional gamers. We just played different video games.
It's like, what did you play?
I played RuneScape and Call of Duty.
I was Call of Duty, dude.
Call of Duty, Madden. So I was 7th grade on the pro circuit for Call of Duty 4.
Fuck
because in 6th grade, I tore my rotator cuff pitching. and I couldn't play sports for 2 years, basically. And like my shoulder was kind of immobile. And I'd, been an obsessive video game kid growing up, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, all that stuff. But it was the first time that I could play as much as I wanted without any repercussion. It was just like, I can't exercise, I'm playing. So he played World of Warcraft, and there's something to be said about a lot of our team are similar in that. They had that rather obsessive personality, which we find as a feature if it's pointed in the right direction.
100%.
And I think growing up, I say all the time, the best thing my parents let me do were follow those different obsessions, because it allowed me to meet other people who are similarly obsessed with things like that. And now I recognize that the type of people I like to work with also had that trait. And so I kind of screen for it on the front end. Like, how much are you going to immerse yourself in this job when you join? Is it something you're just checking a box for? Is it something you're going to think about is, how do I become the best at this?
And that's how you go above and beyond, right? Like, these guys can be flexible. They're not working 9 to 5 specifically,
Right.
but they're about it, And that's why some of our team they might jump on calls at 10 or 11 because of time zones and whatnot. They're willing to make that approach. That was interesting. You mentioned about obsessed and kind of borderline addictive. How do you kind of rationalize that, or how do you utilize that? Because you had the gaming background, football background. Even when I watch your dieting videos about you kind of losing weight, I could see that same behavior just repeated, right? Successfully excludes, you could do anything. It's the same process. How do you channel that?
Well, it's certainly not 100% a positive or negative thing. I think it needs to be pointed in the right direction to be positive. As much as I have figured out how to point it in the right direction, I very easily could have just gone down a completely different path and become obsessed with things that aren't productive.
That was me about when I was drinking, taking drugs, doing all that dumb shit. Like, it was just occupying my brain with the wrong thing.
But also that was in its own a game. Like, how could I have a more fun party? How could I go to a cooler place? All that. So it wasn't necessarily that it was different. You just had it in a vehicle that wasn't as effective. So for me, this is the book I eventually want to write, or one of multiple. It's How to Learn Anything Quickly. And my whole process is just immersion. So get in and think about it quite literally 24/7. So go to bed thinking about it, wake up thinking about it. And recently that's manifested in when I think there's like a small part of the business that needs to improve. Like, for example, our show rate dipped on our calls. And so I spent 3 or 4 days just only thinking about that thing and looking at as many different data points and talking to different people in different industries and watching videos and all that for one specific thing. And so it's almost like a surgical obsession now rather than a holistic one. I'm trying to optimize my whole business day to day with minimal number of things that take me away from being able to basically survey the whole machine, find the bottleneck, surgically go in and obsess on it as much as I can, fix it, and then move on to the next thing. And if I can do that every day, I know we'll continue to grow, because that is where superpower is the wrong word. I don't want to label it as that, but that's where I find that I can provide the most value.
Do you want to know how we book the most amazing guests on our podcast like you're seeing today? I've created a full template and guide and every single script that I've ever used to get the best guests in the world, and I've put everything together in a simple step-by-step process. If you click the link down below, I'll give you the exact guide to book any guests on your podcast, and I have a full guest management system for you to manage every single guest. If you want to see the process behind booking guests like Justin Waller, Luke Belmar, Sterling Cooper, and every guest in the online business space, click the link down below and you'll get the full guide for free. Thank you. It's your zone of genius.
Yeah.
Effectively, right? That's like where you know you can dive as much time in as possible. Tell me about when you were overweight. Like, why do you think you were 280 pounds?
So, good question. At different points in the journey, different reasons led to that, I think. I think growing up, I came from like a very, very humble household, not a lot of disposable income, eating a lot of fast food, and my parents didn't know any better. It wasn't like they were like, oh, we're just going to give them all the shit. It was like, that was what was cheap. We lived far away. We had to drive, whatever. Then it turned into a good thing when I got to like 8th grade and I realized I could play football. So then the behavior was rewarded. It was like, you get bigger and stronger, you get better at football, continue to do that. And then I wasn't a I was a pretty good in shape 280. I had a 30-inch vertical, squatted 505 for a handful, clean 365. Like I could move and I was in good shape. So it wasn't like I was just obese. But about 4 months after the season ended, my senior year, I I stopped working out and doing all the football, but I did not stop any of my consumption habits. So I was eating as much, drinking as much, all that, senior in college.
So your metabolism.
Yeah.
Just demand on your body.
And so, but I gained 20 pounds, and then said, okay, I more or less have to rewrite my whole life operating system at this point. Everything that I've been rewarded for in the past for getting bigger, stronger is not going to serve me in the long run. I now need to deploy whatever it is to figure out how to do this. So I just immersed myself in that world. What are the different types of diets? What are macros? What is cardio? All this stuff that I'd taken for granted because I had coaches and trainers and things like that to get me to where I was football wise. But when you had to take it on for yourself, it's like, okay, there's a new skill to go and develop. There's a new topic to better understand. And so I just, for 2 years, that was all I thought about. Tracking my weight, tracking my macros, all that. And then I don't do it as seriously now unless I need to. Like I spent 3 months in Europe and had gelato every night for like 8 weeks and got back here and was like, all right, let's tidy up a little bit and you can tap into that more rigid structure.
Well, you've built a baseline of your muscle and strength, and now you're just playing with numbers.
Exactly.
You're literally playing with the macro numbers.
Right.
Okay. So when you were coming down in that weight, like what's it like losing 80 pounds?
It happened in a couple of stages.
Yeah.
So I went from 280 to 250 in about a month. And probably, about a month, because all the inflammation came out of my body. I had a very nice routine of I'd wake up, I would walk to Dunkin' Donuts on campus, get a large iced coffee, walk to the treadmill, 1 hour every single day in a hoodie at 3:12, so 3.512, 3.5 speed, 12 incline. And I was a big man to be moving that long for that fast, and so I would burn a ton of calories doing that. And then I just completely cut carbs to zero. Not what I recommend now to someone doing that, but I was just like, you're telling me that I can kind of lose weight and all I have to eat is like eggs and burgers and vegetables? Okay, that sounds all right to me. So I lost the first 40 pounds doing that. And then it was like from 230 to 210, took a bit. And then that was a whole new skill. It's like, okay, how do you, because I couldn't just drop the inflammation. Now I needed to track, et cetera. The easy part was over. And then from 210 to 190, I had to really dial in my workouts because I had lost a lot of weight, but lost a lot of muscle at the same time. And then about 2 years ago, I went from 190 to like 175 and was like, I'm going to get as lean as I can so I can see my six pack in the mirror because I'm 24 years old and I've never seen it before. Yeah. And so I'm like, that was my goal. I saw it. I got the pictures like, I'm not meant to be this lean. Like I have been coming out of it. So over the last like 2 years, went from 175 back to 210 and now kind of hanging out here.
How much negative returns did you have? There's an inverse relationship, right? When you get down below,
it's horrible, dude.
Maybe below 190 for you, there's an inverse relationship continuously coming down. It's like, bear in mind, that's bodybuilding 101.
For sure. It was horrible. I mean, I didn't recognize it at the time because it was the first time I was doing it. Yeah. But I was on like 1,800 calories a day. Like,
body just can't. But even mentally, right? That's the main thing for you specifically, right?
It was mentally for me, I felt less sharp, but it was also just, I kind of lost myself for why am I doing this? What am I chasing here? And it probably goes back to being, the chubby sixth, seventh grader trying to figure it out. Like I just wanted to be in good shape because I had never been really. And so when I got there, I was like, I got here, but I don't feel very good. Damn, I sold a little bit of a lie in my head. And so then had to learn, what is it like to reverse diet? What's it like to
a bitch?
A bitch. Two, psychologically, it was the first time in 5 years that I was gaining weight. So it's like, okay, what does that mean for your, like, wow, I've built my whole thing around, I lost 100 pounds and now I got to get bigger. That's going to be a little bit hard to manage. So none of this has been the right or wrong choice, but I've gotten to learn so much from that and then apply it to business, relationships, everything.
There's a lot of mental gymnastics going on as well with that, because like the reason why bodybuilding is really interesting to observe, or just let's say like the gym and fitness in general, is because it's an infinite game. There's no winner, no loser. When you got down to 175, there's no trophy, right? But you could try to interject that with a competition, right? So when I was younger, I was in college and it was like, okay, we'll prep for a show. Let's put on 20 kilos over a year. Let's lose 15 kilos over the next 6 months, because all I'm doing is just sitting in a fucking lab class in between. Whereas when I went back to that at 24, 25, my coach I'm still with now for the past 2.5 years, We went at it again, up 20 kilos. So I'm 75 kilos, which is like 175.
Yeah.
I put on 15 kilos. So up to almost 90. What is that? Like
That's
190?
like 200, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like 5'7" on a good day, right? 5'7" on a good day. So then we came down.
Stocked, dude.
Right?
Hell yeah.
Then
That'd be fun though.
It was fun,
Yeah.
but again, it's back like what games are we playing? Are we
Right.
playing the wrong game? So then I came down, got super shredded, and then the question came: did we want to try compete?
Yeah.
And where I'm based in Asia, the only PCA shows, PCA is like the biggest kind of like tour,
Yeah.
is Bangkok, which everyone's roided off their head. Singapore, which is actually not really it's not a good caliber. It's not really what's the word? It's not really approved as a good show. And then there's Tokyo. And then my coach said to me, he was like, "What's the goal here? Is it a 10 million year business or shredded glutes on stage covered in fake tan?"
Shredded
Right?
glutes, dude.
And then he was like, "What are you doing?" Genuinely,
Yeah.
him who could have made a ton of money upselling me into the coaching program
Definitely.
was just like, "What's the goal?" And I was like, "Fuck, man, you're so
I haven't
right."
stopped and thought about that. You know, that's where you were.
So it's
And
an
most
interesting
people go their
observation.
whole lives without doing that.
Yeah.
They just are on some kind of path, and you go, okay, what is your tangible goal right now? Don't know.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so why'd you do any of the things you did today? Don't know. Good question.
Because you may not need the money that you need or to do the train
Right,
that you need
exactly.
to do apart from what you enjoy, right? So that kind of set me down an awful trajectory, which is why I wanted to get into running. And I have been running. And
Okay.
like I wanted to get into ultras, go down the ultra path.
Dope.
But again, that's another fucking system in itself, right? Because again, it's all about mental real estate, about
Yeah.
what the goal is, right? Because when I was younger, I used to think I could add in more things, which I could do because
Yeah.
the focus isn't exactly university 24/7. But something goes, something gives continuously.
I went down the hybrid athlete, which I can talk a second about. I think hybrid athletes should have to have combat of some kind. Otherwise, it's just lifting and running. I think it's such an interesting term. But anyway, that's a tangent. I went down I was really inspired by Nick Bear and another YouTuber and watching his whole story. And so when he got into running, I picked it up too. And so I was going to train for a marathon in 21 during all this time. But I just found that it was so hard on my lower body and I didn't have the running form and I just didn't enjoy it that much, but stopped running, did regular cardio. And now I'm starting to get the itch again because there's something to be said about that morning run that you hit the pavement during sunrise, your mind just comes back so clear. You're on a high the rest of the day. But I found myself, the amount of maintenance I had to do to keep my calves and ankles and knees just good because I beat them up so badly when I was playing football that I was like, this is an hour of running a day and 2 hours of maintenance a day.
100%.
You know, so
So in Bali, you kind of have like the luxuries of being able to have like a physio and being able to have like
true.
so on and so forth. So I would run in the morning, but to your point about the morning run, so there's an inverse. So have you know Gad Sad, who was on Dr. Gad Sad, who was on Joe Rogan a few times?
Yep.
He's been on my podcast, and he has this concept called the inverted U curve. So he said everything in life follows an inverted U curve.
Yep.
So like sex is good, but too much sex, you're an addict.
Yep.
You know, a painkiller is good if you're injured. Too much painkillers, you're addicted to opioids, right? Same with like happiness. Same with the gym. There's diminishing returns, and of course, running comes into that too. So when you start and you have our brains, you're like, oh, 5K, cool. And then you do the 5K and you're like, maybe I could do 10K. And then you do the 10K and you can't even focus for work afterwards, right? So that was happening to me. Like I went 0 to fucking 0. And what happened then was I spent half the rest of the day having physios. Physios pretty much lived in my house. And they were like, we need to do more shit.
Yeah.
And they would start doing like physio work, which was meant to be 60 minutes. But the like functional movements was another 60 minutes.
Right.
And then they were late. And then it's like 2 p.m.
Yeah.
You know,
It's like,
so
what's the goal? The goal is to feel good. So I started running, and then to keep feeling good while I was running, I had to go do all this stuff. And then I ended up feeling worse than before I started running. So I should just stop running.
And that's when it comes into like the health, wealth, and relationships, right? Which like you've maximized at the wealth side. You've been working on your health continuously. How have you kind of pieced in the relationship side recently?
The relationship side was kind of a non-starter in 2020 and 21 for me. I was just like, look, it's nice because we're all locked down anyway. There's nothing to go and do. And I was at home with my mom, who I was taking care of at the time. So it wasn't top of mind then. Built a good foundation. And then 22, 23, I was like, okay, I want to give this more attention. I know long-term, this is definitely something I want to pursue. I think having a large family, being a father is kind of the main thing I'm called for over the long term and something I'm really excited about. And yeah, I'm in a relationship right now. I've been dating her for a little under a year.
Cool.
And I met her in Amsterdam while I was there. And the fun part about this was I wasn't actively dating at the time. I was just open to it. And I was going about my normal day to day, which was at the time running my business. I'm 8 hours ahead or 6 hours ahead of East Coast. So I would go to a cafe. I'd write for like 2 or 3 hours, and she sat down next to me, went on a couple dates, and have been dating since. So it's
Sick.
what's cool about it is I didn't have to do anything differently on a day to day to make it happen, and then to bring like the relationship into my life.
Yeah.
There have been obviously some things I've had to change and adapt, but those are all good things that I didn't want it to only do forever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm at on the relationship side. And I think
Cool.
I'm happy with how I did all that, which was, look, it wasn't a no forever thing, but it was at the right time, take that part of my life down to focus on my health and money. And ultimately those two things make the third one a byproduct if you're just going about your day to day, is how I found it.
Do you think that people should wait and build a business, then get a girlfriend, or?
So here's the thing is if you told me right now, if in 2020 and 2021, I went on a date like every 2 weeks, would I be in a better financial and relationship situation or worse? I couldn't answer that. So I don't know.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't give advice to someone on that. But my take is like, it depends on where you're at. For me, the type of person I was going to attract when I was out of shape and didn't have my own business and had literally zero savings, quite frankly, I don't think would be the type of person I wanted to attract in the long run. So it wasn't for me like a problem to delay because my personal value that I felt like I was bringing as a man was just lower.
Good point. But at the same time, like, your partner is with you for who you are, not what you have.
Correct. But I also think that who I became through the pursuit of those things is actually what she became attracted to, on top of the more natural things that, like my personality, other things like that. But I had to fix my level of consistency, my level of discipline, the way I could provide for someone. So it definitely wasn't what I have, but it was through and this is where I think sometimes people are like, oh, you shouldn't pursue bigger things because once you get there, like, you're going to find out you're no more fulfilled or whatever. But I'm like, yeah, but the skills you build along the way are the actual prize,
It's
the
an
actual
infinite
value.
game.
And so that's how I think about it. It's not like, oh, I can tell you 100% that having more money and being in better shape didn't directly, it wasn't like, oh, he clearly has money and he's clearly in good shape and that's why I'm going to date him. No.
It's so multifactorial. That's where, like, the advice you see on Twitter and the Red Pill community is just like, you know, it's coming from someone who's like 19 with nothing, right?
And dude, it's like, I mean, I don't even need to get into that. You have to just, but I probably was negatively impacted by that community when I was like in high school, because it just seems right. They're just spewing vile and nonsense, and it's from people who are disappointed and projecting their negative feelings about it. So
The source is always so important.
Exactly.
You know?
And so for me, I'm kind of I will take advice from no one who I wouldn't trade lives with completely. And right now, there's no one that I won't take general life advice from anyone who I wouldn't trade with. The only people like in my head that I would quote unquote trade with are really what I want to feel and be when I'm older. So anytime there's like a 70-year-old who's in great shape and they are talking to me, I'm like, I just want to know what's been going on with you, because you're clearly an outlier and I can learn something. But like, to take advice from someone who's tweeting about it as a 30-year-old saying, this is what you need to do is no.
So are you familiar with Robert Glover? He's been on Chris Williamson a few times. He has the book called like No More Mr. Nice Guy. It's like a famous saying. His saying is kind of gone viral, which is like, women are attracted to someone who has a plan, knows where they're going, and is having fun while doing it.
Yeah.
You know? So I think for you, maybe you didn't have that like figured out in the beginning, but like, that's kind of like the scenario with me and Elise, was the fact that I didn't have the wealth sorted. I had the health sorted. You know, I've just always been into fitness. And then I was focused on the relationship. And then it was Elise saw like, oh, like, you could start a podcast, you could do this, you should do this. She kind of saw the wealth side in me when I was just so fucking Matrix vibes, being like, I need to get a promotion.
Right.
You know, and she was like, you don't actually need to do that. So, but to your point though, like, the person you wanted to become, I think I've always had the same values, but I just had them channeled in the wrong way. It wasn't focused on building something.
Right.
Does that make sense? Until I made that conscious decision in 2020, which is when we went like full all in on this. Not necessarily all in. It wasn't like giving up the job, but it was just like, I wake up and my pursuit is this versus everything else.
And I think that's spot on. It's, I don't know. What'd you say his name was who was on Chris's podcast?
Robert Glover.
Okay.
Yeah, I've interviewed him as well. Good guy. Really nice guy.
If you have a plan, it's very clear that I'd say the other person might feel like you're going some direction, whether or not they're there or not. And so they're almost attracted to that aspect of it. It's like, cool, he's going somewhere.
An example is like, if you love flowers and you're just genuinely obsessed with this, and like someone would be attracted to someone who's obsessed with something.
Yes.
Do you get
That's
me?
it. It's, you're committed to something.
Exactly.
You have something to, there's texture, there's substance, there's a strong opinion on, I think one of my buddies, his name's Ian Dew, he's on Twitter. He talks about what makes something cool is literally just that you're about it and you don't care that other people aren't.
Yeah.
So you could be super interested in sparkling waters, and on the surface, that's not cool until you hear someone talk to you all about the different types of sparkling. Like, dude, that's fucking cool.
Dude, that's so interesting. And like, I think the reason why is because the antithesis of that is just someone who's guided by like following, and we'll talk about this, like following like politics, sport, letting everything else feed into.
Yeah, they have
or even Twitter, right? Just like Twitter, LinkedIn, that is your personality.
Yes.
It's just what you consume. And like the perfect example of that is like, let's say like, I don't know, like chicks that just get into like OnlyFans. They're just guided by that mechanism because that's how they were told by other people to do it. Question for you on that is like, have you fallen out of love with sport as a result? Because it's everywhere, dude. Like went to the gyms here.
So actually, no. And I find I'm watching more college football or the NFL than I did at any point in my growing journey, because it is something that is so different than what I spend all my other time on.
That's a good
but
point.
It's not brain rot in that, you know, if you just, as much time as I spend online and on the internet and writing and things like that, like you have to just step away and see something completely different.
Yeah.
And I find that in a higher stress time, if I come off a day with like 12 meetings, I actually am so stimulated in my head that like I can't just sit in silence because I have so many things that I'm thinking about. So I'll like brain dump journal and then put on a Pardon My Take, the football podcast. Cool. It's like one of the biggest sports podcasts. And it's just the perfect amount of different that I've always loved it growing up. So I never thought like that people were like, oh, you should never watch sports again. I'm like, dude, sports are sick. Like people, high level athletes, that's about as cool as it gets in terms of you got so good at something that you make hundreds of millions of dollars for doing it.
I like how you're using it as a way that as you're growing the business, not plateauing and going backwards, you're using it as a vessel to like have an outlet. If I was to give you an analogy for myself, that's not like sport related. It would be like dogs.
Yeah.
Right? So we have a ton of dogs at home. Me and Elise literally talk about dogs like 24/7.
Damn, what kind of dogs do you have?
They're all rescues.
Wow.
I have a blind dog that was shot.
Oh my God, dude.
I have a dog that was thrown off a cliff. I have a dog that was abandoned in a house.
Damn.
And like literally broke its way through. And then another dog that nearly died from parvovirus. These are all the really bad like diseases. Sorry? Cancer, another dog from cancer. And then we own a well, at least as a charity in Indonesia. So like that's kind of what, if I was to give you a comparison, that would be my vessel, right?
Interesting.
Whereas like someone else could look at that and be like, stop doing that, run the fucking funnel.
Right.
Whereas like
it's productive in that it makes your time spent on the other things better. And so if you describe something as productivity.
And effective.
Right.
And
exactly.
effective, yeah.
And so if you didn't have that, your output would decrease actually on the funnel because you'd probably make a mistake or make a bad decision because you're not in the optimal headspace to do it. So you actually need those outlets. And I think I made that mistake a lot.
It's Parkinson's law too, right? It'll expand with the time allocated.
Yep.
I've actually noticed that when I was here, I actually spoke to my team being like, oh, we need support on this, and this while I'm recording. When it's actually not true. I just got up today 6:30. I had all the emails done by 7. Yeah. And I was meeting Cole by 8:30. You know, so it's interesting how like we can actually utilize
You can do way more than you think, but not way more of the work. You could actually just condense your work and spend more time on other things.
You could just have more fun.
Yep.
Do you get me? What have you learned from people like Dan Cole in particular? Right? Because I guess you've kind of gone a different direction now in terms of...
I mean, Dan has done an absolutely world-class job at talking about one broad topic for a long time and just really going deep on his philosophy for it. I think you can't underestimate someone's consistency to put out a 40-minute talking video that's clearly written for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and months and years. It's awesome. And so I think what I admire most about Dan is I took a different path in that I've actually ramped my writing down because I'm running operations on a lot of different businesses. And that personally is where I feel more fulfilled. My thoughts on writing, I learned that because I was so bad at it in high school and college and when I started to work. But I treated it no different than a lot of the other obsessions that I've had, in that I got it to a certain level and now find that, okay, through getting as good at writing as I did, like social media writing, copywriting, things like that, and almost becoming like known for it, I recognized that it was just the first thing that I had publicly documented learning.
That's a good
And so
point.
I actually have pulled back from wanting to be branded or only talked about that, because it's not what I'm most interested in. I'm most interested in acquiring skills quickly. And so that's all I like to document, is whatever it is I'm learning at the time. It just happened that I was rewarded writing on social media about that thing.
Because that's what I thought you were known for again,
No,
you know,
right.
especially in the early stages when I saw you and Cole, and that was going to be my first question, which is like, why are you different? But you're not. Or sorry, you are for many different reasons. Fuck man, I have so many questions for you. I know we're running out of time.
No,
but
I got plenty of time. And I guess finishing up or putting a pin on that point on Dan is I went a different direction in that I knew I might be interested in like writing books and things like that in the future, but I am more obsessed with just finding a new problem to solve and soaking on that problem.
Similar.
And like right now it's building the infrastructure to get to $1 million a month. And that is like my game right now. And that doesn't the disconnect. And so I'll tell the metaphor that I think a lot about for this kind of stuff. If you imagine a pitching machine, and the goal of that pitching machine is to throw 10 pitches in a minute, something like that, right? If you don't have 10 balls, the first step is to get as many, or I'm working on this metaphor, so give me a second to talk about. But basically, here, actually, I don't need to try to explain that one, because I don't think I have the clarity of thought at this point to talk on that one. But basically, the metaphor I'm trying to get to is I only want to work on the thing that gets us to the next level of that thing. And so right now, writing is not the bottleneck of our business. My personal writing is not, so therefore I'm not dedicating as much attention to it.
And that's what I'm learning a lot from you guys today. It's like being like a masterclass on that. Specifically, it's like we can do a lot of things, whether it's writing, podcasts and whatnot, but is that actually what's moving the needle in the business? Right. People always talk about high leverage shit and so on. And to get to where you're at is you've been doing that so much, but there's refinement involved. Question for you on your SaaS.
Yeah.
Is that splitting the focus, or does that complement the ecosystem?
It depends on how much attention we're giving it. So it complements the ecosystem in that it's a nice thing for us to have, but splitting attention, if I were to give it any more attention than I currently do, which is not a full-time job. To do SaaS well, it is by far and away the most difficult business. Not even close. Anyone who says anything else, you have the most minute detail in the product itself is what drives user satisfaction. And you just have to obsess over the smallest. And that takes so much effort, so much input to talk to customers and watch them and study every single thing, that I don't have the time to do it. And I don't have the big enough vision for the SaaS platform to really say, okay, this is the game I want to play. And it's a different game in that the outcome, it's like a lump sum at the end if you sell it, but you don't make as much on the way up. And so a lot of where I find myself allocating on the business side is a function of how much money I've either made or have. And so I think a lot of people that do SaaS probably had some kind of either exit before or a high cash flow business that puts them in a financial position where it's like, okay, now I can swing for bigger things. Like Alex Becker is a great example. He was info products, coaching, masterminds, et cetera, till he had a certain amount of money and was like, okay, I'm just going to focus on SaaS because that's the only way. It's like the 10 to 30 thing I talked about earlier. The only way to get to 30 is something completely different. And that's where I need to allocate my attention. So for us, it's like at its current level, it's awesome. It's a nice dividend each month. It complements the ecosystem, and anything from here in terms of step changes will require a significant amount of time investment that relative to the other opportunities we have is not the highest.
But it's doing like 40K a month, right?
Yeah, about 40, 50K a month.
Would you sell it?
The thing is, I wouldn't. No, because the buyer would probably sell for, or they'd want to buy it maybe like 3 times revenue, 3 to 5, because our churn is not like one, it's slightly tied to our brand. So that puts a little bit of risk. And then second, the churn of like 10% a month, or I actually don't know what our exact number is. And
That's high.
yeah, I don't think it's that high, but it's probably lower than that. And so I don't want to misquote it. But at that level, it's hard to sell and needs to be fixed, right? So I wouldn't think about selling it unless the target was to sell it. Then I'd say, okay, what needs to be true for us to sell it? Well, we need to. The ironic part is to get it to a point that I want to sell it, I'd want to keep it.
Yeah.
You know what I
makes
mean?
points,
And
yeah.
so I'm not in the, if you decide like, okay, actually I want to try to get this to a certain valuation, flip it for $3 million and I'm out potentially, but it's not something I think about because yeah, right now it's 45-ish K, 15K take home each, like 95% margin, software business, 1 employee, like that's pretty good.
Fucking hell. And what was the idea to start it? So if you're not going to scale it, what was the logic there?
It actually just solved the problem in Ship 30. So Ship 30 for 30, write and publish 30 atomic essays every day for a month. We were writing all our essays in Apple Notes, and we look like celebrities giving public apologies, just tweeting out ideas. And so someone came to us, Sam, our third co-founder on that. He made a little web app that was like, hey, all these essays look like shit. Maybe you should put them in this thing. And it was like a little text pad that you wrote in, and then it put out like a nice visual image of the writing. And so
Crazy, man. It's that simple.
yeah, that was it. And so he started working with us, and then it was a nice funnel from people would join Ship 30. We would teach to type share and give them a free 30 days for the whole thing, so they didn't have to pay for it. They just got to use it, and then the retention after that would be if they continue to write on it. But very hard to, the amount of effort it takes to talk to all the customers is so high that if you're not giving a SaaS your full-time attention, you need to give it like the minimum attention to just keep it at whatever level you're at.
Yeah, my mentor that I spoke to you about earlier, he said the exact same thing to us because we have a lot of opportunity in the podcast space, you know, vertical integration. There's just so much, it's so operationally heavy that we have the product owners, which is our team. We have the customers that we can have the customers in our coaching that can be the clients. And then we also have people in our clients, so agency enterprise model. There's a lot going on there, but there's a lot of opportunity there to solve a lot of big problems. And one of my tutors in university has actually came to us being like, look, I'm happy to help you guys build it, and we could do something kind of cool there. And it's definitely viable, and it's just feasible too. It's just timing. You know, it's just timing. And he said to me from being burned many times, he was like, look, you need to be all in, you know, all in 24/7. And I learned a lot from, well, obviously doing it myself, but you know, Ghislaine from Lemlist.
Yeah, they just had an exit, right? Or something.
Oh, really?
Or maybe they acquired something. I don't know. No, Lemlist might be different than what I'm thinking. I'm thinking of.
Maybe. Well, if it is,
I don't
that's
know.
cool. Well, he actually sold a portion recently, about 2 years ago.
Okay.
But he's a super cool dude. He's like a French guy, completely bootstrapped.
Yeah.
He's living in Cape Town now. But Lemlist is the biggest cold outreach platform for the most part for people. He was in customer support since they started.
Yep, you have to be.
He's in customer
You
support.
have to be the one answering all the emails.
And dude, how many users do they have?
And I cannot do that. Like straight up, I find that my level of intention to scale a SaaS business at this current time is not there because I don't think I have the skills to yet. And the skills that I could build on the managing and hiring side, I'd rather learn on a high cash flow business that I get paid on the way up. And so that's how I think about it is I'm going to learn the same skills no matter which business I apply. Why not pick the one that pays me now so that then I can then apply those same lessons to a bigger bet in the future without risking any financial security.
Well, that's the inverse to what you're told in Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah, but look who tells you that. The incentives of people who already have their finances already taken care of.
And who are investing.
And they're investing, right? So they actually don't care if you survive. They just want you to get as big as possible. They don't care if you make any money on the way up, right? Which is crazy, actually, now that you say that, from an incentives perspective, of course, because they have enough money where their needle only gets moved if they have a massive exit inside a portfolio fund.
Yep.
So, or yeah.
Dude, that's an entire podcast in terms of like the shift in the mindset. So that's a finite mindset because the end goal.
Yep.
And then what you're doing is more of an infinite mindset. And then as a result, the shift in leadership.
Yep.
Because if you're building for an exit, you're a failure until you're a success.
Right.
So everything is a loss until you're a winner, which means that you come into this with a complete different approach, which is honest to God, like something that I've been very, very, very conscious of. Just because I've seen the businesses, I've worked in them, man. I've worked in the tiny startups, the scale ups.
Yeah.
And I just know what it feels like to get a knock from an investor into the team being like, still not profitable. You got 20 days left of runway.
Yeah. Versus, yeah, it takes a certain level of risk to do that. And I find myself extremely risk averse. Like I left BlackRock when my Ship 30 monthly earnings were twice what I was making at BlackRock.
Dude, you know Brett Williams, the space here?
Yeah.
You know Brett, yeah? Like he was he's doing like 65,000 a month for a year before he left his job as a designer.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, everyone's appetite is different, right? And then he went from like 65 to God knows how much. He's doing like 150K or some shit.
Damn.
And it's not even about that. It's just about the framing, right?
And that's how I felt about it. It was, I need to be so sure that I take this path that I waited a year longer than most people told me. They're like, oh, once you get half of it, then you need to go all in on it.
That's what I did.
Mine was the opposite. It was a bigger financial risk for me to stay than it was to leave. So people are like, oh, what got you to take the leap? I'm like, it's actually the reverse leap. I needed to take the leap off my full-time thing into the main thing. Or off the side hustle back into the main thing.
I want to say a big thank you, man.
Hey, thanks, dude. This was a lot of fun. I feel like we covered a lot of good ground.
Yeah, man. It's fucking 2 hours.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I
I
appreciate
felt like
it, man.
20 minutes.
Yeah. I want to say a big thank you, though. And hopefully it was different for you, too.
It definitely was. I think we covered a large bunch of topics that I always say if I had a podcast, the first thing I would say is I don't want to hear your background story. Like,
dude,
I don't want to
course.
hear your tell me this. And so, we sprinkled it in here and there, but just jumping right into what was top of mind.
It's storytelling though, right? Like your stories are what you did, not exactly like tell me the fucking plan, right?
Right.
Because then we end up getting nothing done.
Exactly.
You know?
Well, dude, I appreciate you coming all the way out here.
Man, I'll be
Hell
back.
Yeah. Let's go.
I'll be back. I've been telling everyone it's my favorite city, man.